Several years ago, I was brought out to Northern Ireland, Belfast, to do a series of speeches across several days about the work that I do on gender equality and modern fatherhood and the role of men, all that stuff. It's a beautiful area. They took me up to the Causeway, which is apparently where Game of Thrones was shot. I've never seen that show. I know. So much pop culture I'm unfamiliar with. Anyway, while I was out there, I met people who were maimed, wounded in the Troubles, fighting that lasted decades. I've been thinking about that lately, looking at what's going on in America. There are real dangers of lasting political violence here, as both ends of our polarized society become more and more supportive of violence. The media has played a huge role in getting us here. Right-wing media has been ignoring or straight up lying about the growth of violence on the right, and mainstream media has been straight up ignoring or lying about the growth of violence on the left. In order to understand what's really going on, we have to do something that is difficult, but it's something that anti-democratic groups do all the time, and some political candidates have been willing to do. Look into the darkness. It's uncomfortable, looking at how people become filled with hate and a willingness to engage in violence and support violence, and a willingness among others to look away and imagine that is not happening. To understand all this, we need to take a look at a repugnant guy who has been called the Charlie Kirk of the left, but he's worse. And we have to come to understand something. He and other extremist figures on the left and the right say repugnant things all the time. People don't love them despite those things. People love them because of the sick and twisted, false things they say. Meanwhile, a new survey shows the wild levels of support for political violence among college students. The rate at which this is growing is massive. And I'll take you into some ideological breakdowns to tell you where it's worst. Coming up, how all this is crucial context for what's going on with late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. He has an opportunity here that is totally lost in the coverage. Also today, the BBC has censured one of its own presenters for daring to say something true. All that and more coming up on They Stand Corrected. Hello, welcome. I'm Josh Lebs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. So good to have you here, and thank you for joining this effort to hold the media accountable. You can learn about me at my website, joshlebs.com. I spent 20 years in mainstream media on NPR and CNN, where I became lead on-air fact-checker, and I have always seen that the media itself desperately needs fact-checking. That's happening here. Your responses to last week's episode about media coverage of homicides, including political violence, have been amazing. Thank you. I try to piece through these. Here is one from Zach Burkew. Oh, Zach, faithful listener. He wrote, "Your latest episode is so good. The analysis is incredibly thoughtful. It is so needed in this moment." Wow, thank you. I got this voice message from a professional actor. Let me set this up. Last week, I explained that two actors at the Emmys said these crazy things about Israel that are anti-Semitic by definition. Here is this actor, Yuval David.
Hey, Josh, it's so important that you're covering this story, especially from a place of understanding, being informed and educated about the topics. We keep seeing this moral posturing of Hollywood celebrities, ignoring their own hypocrisy, like Hannah Einbender, who jokes about hate while Javier Bardem delivers virtue-signaling speeches and calling himself brave. But the industry is staying far too silent when real hatred and violence are aimed at the Jewish people.
He went on to list a bunch of things I've talked about on this show, millions of people being killed in wars and conflicts all over the world, and that these stars never say or do anything. When you say that, what people usually do is they try to run to the money excuse. Oh, America gives money to Israel. Well, they don't know the many countries that the United States gives money to. None of these people care. Here's a little more from this actor, Yuval David.
These award shows have become sermons of empty virtue, false moral superiority, and applause for activism that ignores reality. Celebrities who are misinformed should not be seen as global leaders in the political and social landscape when all they really do is performative activism.
Yep, well said. All right, all this leads us into today's topic because that messaging is fueling political violence. I explained last week that the leading researchers on this have found that anti-Semitism fuels support for political violence for seemingly unrelated causes on the left and the right. The mainstream media has been calling out dehumanizing and violent rhetoric and actions on the right, but not on the left. Here's a super clear example of the craziness happening in left-wing media. There is a site called The Nation, a quote-unquote news site. They had this headline that is designed to sound legit. It says, "The killing of Charlie Kirk is part of a terrible new era of political violence." That's true. Yep, it is. They talk about how an expert I quoted last week says lawmakers should come together to call for an end to it. And then The Nation goes on to put all the responsibility on one side. Quote, "This proposal seems wildly utopian in the current moment. Trump is not a man to seek calm. In terms of political violence, he's an arsonist, not a firefighter." Sure, that's a fair assessment. But what about a good hard look at their own camp? Nope. This same place, The Nation, has a staffer whom they call their Palestinian poet and Palestine correspondent. He is openly a pro-terrorism, pro-violence, lying, dangerous propagandist. His name is Mohammed El-Kurd. Last year, he wrote on social media how awful it is that you can't hijack planes and you can't throw Molotov cocktails. He called those things being banned signs that you just can't be, in reference to Palestinians, of course. By the way, since I like to fact check things, I will tell you back in episode 8 of this show, I explained that Palestinian terrorists hijacked planes, including some that had nothing to do with Israel. Not that that should matter. Hijacking passenger aircraft should be equally awful no matter who you're doing it to. But this is just history that no one knows because the media doesn't mention it because it doesn't fit their narrative. Anyway, this is emblematic of what's happening in our society. Right-wing media don't want to look at some of what's going on their side. They also don't want to look at some of the more problematic things that Charlie Kirk said. Instead, they explain everything away or ignore it. He did propagate the Great Replacement theory about Jews trying to bring non-white people into America to replace white people. Nothing about it makes sense. And on the left, you have media saying, oh, look at the right. They're the problem. It's all us, not them. That gets society nowhere. The mainstream media should obviously be calling out all the extremist movements. Here is an example that makes clear how the media has been failing us. For years, mainstream news agencies have called out specific things Charlie Kirk said and explored them. In the days before Kirk was assassinated, mainstream news organizations were discussing something that he had said about a killing of a woman on light rail in Charlottesville. That's an incident I discussed last week. Here's a clip from a panel discussion on CNN. The first voice you'll hear is CNN host Abby Phillips, then Charlie Kirk, and then a couple of CNN's panelists.
Certain people have been looking for an opportunity to find a case like this, to make a point like this. I want to play, this is Charlie Kirk, why he says this hasn't gotten a lot of attention.
A white Ukrainian refugee was murdered just because she was white. Everybody knows that, obviously. If a random white person simply walked up to and stabbed a nice, law-abiding black person for no reason, it would be an apocalyptically huge national story used to impose national sweeping political changes on the whole country. Instead, no one seems to care when a white woman gets stabbed to the death.
Wow. He said white a lot.
Well, we are talking about it here. So I guess I don't think that's fair.
They went into a discussion about the case, and then Abby Phillips brought in Van Jones, a political commentator for the network.
People like Charlie Kirk, they've been looking for opportunities to make this some sort of like reciprocal George Floyd situation. And That's the part that I think he's almost giving away the game. And it's sad to see a lot of people going along with it.
What happened to that young woman was horrible. And it's everybody's nightmare. So it does strike a chord. We don't know why that man did what he did. And for Charlie Kirk to say, we know he did it because she's white, when there's no evidence of that, it's just pure race mongering, hate mongering. It's wrong. Then he says that if something like that had happened the other way, there would be sweeping changes imposed on society. Where is the George Floyd Policing Act? It didn't pass. There were no sweeping changes. In fact, not one law was passed at the federal level.
Okay, a couple things on that. First, he's right, and that is an important point, that no new federal policies were established. So notice this. It was a political commentator, not one of the network's news straight-up journalists, who provided something of a fact check in there. That said, you could argue that when Charlie Kirk was referring to the idea of sweeping political changes, he could have meant societal changes pushed by politicians, even if not through policy. Here, though, is the most important takeaway for the purposes of this show. CNN and other news agencies parsed through what Charlie Kirk said with specifics. All right? Let's keep that in mind. Now, I need to tell you about a terror-supporting guy on the left named Hasan Piker. Hopefully you've never heard of him. Sadly, most young people have. He is way, way worse than Charlie Kirk. I have not found examples of Charlie Kirk justifying or supporting evil, murderous violence. Meanwhile, big news agencies describe Hasan Piker as this great progressive figure. He's been profiled by GQ and the New York Times. The DNC, the Democratic National Committee, invited him to be part of the media at the Democratic Convention. He is a guy who streams on this platform called Twitch for hours and hours and hours. How do people have so much time to watch this stuff? That in and of itself is so messed up. Along with video of himself working out, he keeps commenting on what he presents as being the news. And along the way has the most vile comments and most vile anti-Semitic stuff you've seen. Here are just a few of his greatest hits. This is him talking about violence in America.
Kill those motherfuckers! Let the streets soak in their fucking red capitalist bloods, dude.
Apparently he was referring to landlords, and now he says that he was being hyperbolic. But that argument is the same one that people on the right have been using for years when mainstream media point to violent things they say. They say, oh, we never meant it literally. Hasan Piker also says the United States deserved 9/11, and he has repeatedly praised the October 7th massacres by Palestinian terrorists in Israel.
Doesn't matter if fucking rapes happen on October 7th. Like, that doesn't change the dynamic for me even this much.
When he is profiled and written up, mainstream news organizations never establish that he is a hate monger. Instead, he's presented as some sort of hopeful sign that Democrats can win back the so-called manosphere. They like to point out that he claims to support LGBTQ plus people and their rights, but they don't point out that he supports the most anti-LGBTQ regimes on earth, like Palestinians, Iran. He praises Hezbollah, the terrorist mafia that controls southern Lebanon. Here's what's so important to understand in looking at all this. His popularity took off after he was on this thing run by his uncle, whose name is Junk Uyghur. He hosts this left-wing media operation called the Young Turks. I'm going to play for you now one of the many things that Hasan Piker said on that. Warning here, it is graphic and demented, but you should hear the kind of stuff he says. He was talking about Dan Crenshaw, a Republican representative who lost his eye when he was fighting as part of U.S. forces in Afghanistan.
Didn't he go to war and like literally lose his eye because some mujahideen, a brave fucking soldier, fucked his eye hole with their dick? Isn't that how he lost his fucking dumbass eye? Because he got his fucking eye hole fucked?
At the time, after a couple of days, he said, okay, that one comment was inappropriate. But here's the key. People don't support him despite these remarks. They watch and support him because of remarks like this. We need to understand what the media won't tell us. Young people have been radicalized through their phones by lies. If you haven't heard the episode of this show about mimetic warfare, I recommend it. It can help you see so clearly what's going on in our society. Back in 2016, the media gave more and more attention to Trump the more offensive his behaviors were, whether he was insulting prisoners of war or pretending not to know who David Duke was. Actually, I wrote something about that at the time for The Week because David Duke had gone after me by name. Anyway, Trump had openly sexist remarks about Hillary Clinton, all of that. The more shocking, disturbing remarks got attention, and over time, all that attention helped him win support. Right-wing and left-wing anti-democratic movements in this country and around the world have been operating with that same system. Say shocking things, lots of people will talk about you, lots of people will pay attention, many young people will think it's funny. Keep them watching with these antics, and along the way, lie to them about the world's most controversial stuff. Their minds will be changed, they will get radicalized, they will join your anti-democratic, pro-violence hate movements. This is happening. Okay, I played for you how CNN parsed Charlie Kirk's words. Here is CNN interviewing Hasan Piker.
There's been a lot of controversy around you.
Yes.
The way you talk about Israel is viewed by some as anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Are you anti-Semitic?
Of course not. The real problem here is that I'm an anti-Zionist. The real problem here is that I'm extremely critical of Israel.
That's all. CNN just moved right on. Nothing to see here, nothing to explore here, nothing to question or challenge. By the way, this kid also called Haredi Orthodox Jews inbred. There's a great letter that Representative Richie Torres of New York wrote to Amazon, which owns the platform Twitch, telling them to stop praising, celebrating, and platforming this guy's hatred. I'll share that letter in the newsletter. It's got links and videos, you'll see. Oh, and since I fact-check things, I will tell you that comment about inbred is also untrue. You might be wondering if he's referring to an actual phenomenon. No, Haredi Jews actually have very low levels of what's called consanguinity, in which people marry and have children with their cousins. Meanwhile, the societies that Hasan Piker worships have high levels. In Gaza, a study found that 40% of marriages are between cousins. Half of them involve compound consanguinity, which means not only are the parents cousins, but their parents were cousins as well. That helps explain why so many kids in Gaza have genetic illnesses, which the media then pretends are not genetic illnesses, but that their conditions are entirely the result of alleged starvation. If you want to see figures on all this, they're in the newsletter. In that CNN interview, Piker also claimed that people under age 35 are seeing Israel for what it is in ways that older people don't. CNN, of course, did not fact-check that. They should point out what numerous surveys have shown, that young people don't know bare-bones basics about this stuff. Their positions are based on lies. On the right, there are Holocaust-denying haters, like there's a bunch of them. Nick Fuentes is one. He's part of a growing anti-Semitic wing, along with Candace Owens and others. On the left, there are a bunch of people like this guy, Hasan Piker. They're not just hate mongers, though. They are products of a society in which the media has failed so badly that audiences have flocked away and turned elsewhere for news and information. With so many choices, where are audiences going to go? The ones that they heard about the most, the ones that they might even find funny in a super disturbing way, the ones that speak to their increasingly radicalized mind and radicalize them further. They turn to partisan, crazy people. We have to fight back. Coming up, how we can do that. Plus, a new survey on college students, and the BBC punishes someone for violating a rule that others violate regularly. For me and other Jewish people, this time of year is special. It's the High Holy Days, including the beginning of a new year. And hey, every chance for a new beginning is a good one, right? Anyway, here's the point. In this tradition, the number 18 is significant, and that's because of this numerology thing that represents life. This show is only possible because of your support. So right now, if you choose to become a paid subscriber at the newsletter that comes along with this show, you will find that the level is set to a very special and very significant figure. The newsletter is packed with links and information and video and more. And if you'd rather support the show without the newsletter, consider multiples of 18. You can do that through the PayPal link, and you'll find links to all this stuff in the show notes or at my website, joshlebs.com. Thank you. The BBC has censured one of its own presenters for saying something true. Yup. It's punishing the presenter for daring to mention that Hamas is a terrorist group. This goes back to something I talked about when this show started. In episode 2, news agencies claim to have a rule that any references to terror or terrorist group should be attributed to officials. So you could say a government calls something a terrorist group rather than declaring it to be a terrorist group in the voice of the news agency. However, they only enforce that rule when that group focuses primarily on killing Jews. So, this one presenter said this one thing in June, and the BBC, of course, has taken action against them, saying this presenter breached its editorial standards. I did something that no one else seems to be doing. I looked at recent reporting from the BBC. Here is the BBC in July.
In recent years, Islamic State has made the northern Galis Mountains in Puntland their stronghold. The Somali branch is a key logistical and financial hub for the terror group and is said to be growing in influence.
And just so you know that was not a one-off mistake, here is more from that same segment.
How serious would you say the threat is of the Islamic State and other terror groups in Ethiopia and in the region?
Here's another segment from July.
I think for many Nigerians, his biggest legacy will probably be reducing the level of insecurity in northeastern Nigeria, where the terrorist group Boko Haram has been waging an insurgency for decades now.
And there's this from July.
3 men have been found guilty of carrying out an arson attack on a warehouse in East London for the Russian-based terrorist group Wagner. The business supplied satellite equipment to Ukraine, and the fire last year caused around £1 million worth of damage.
Those are just a few recent examples. This has been going on consistently for years and years and years. If this were some hard and fast rule, everyone would be following it routinely, or people would be censured routinely. But of course, they're not. And by the way, this applies to people inside their own country, too. Here's a report from the BBC. I just grabbed a random one. This is from 2021.
Andrew Dimmock was educated at a private school in Bath. His father is a university professor, his mother a successful research scientist. But he went on to set up and lead 2 neo-Nazi terrorist groups that both had to be banned as a threat to national security.
Were any of these people censured? Nope, because the BBC doesn't actually care. Here's something we can do. I have put together an open letter to the BBC demanding equal application of its rules everywhere and citing these specific examples. I explain in journalistic terms how the BBC cannot claim to be upholding their charter, which specifically bans this kind of bias. They get billions of British pounds from taxpayers every year, which is equivalent to even more billions in US dollars currently. And they have lots of advertisers and sponsors, including for their content here in the United States, who should be told about this straight up obvious bigotry. Check out the open letter. I encourage you to join it, share it, send it to them, email it to them. It's in my newsletter. So are instructions on how to email the biggest news agencies and how to send messages that are most likely to be impactful. Young people today have been raised in an imaginary world that is consistently described by big mainstream media. It's a world in which every democratic country and lots of non-democratic countries fight against Islamist terrorism, except Israel. They fight terrorists. They kill terrorists. They capture terrorists. But Israel, no. Israel can only fight, kill, or capture Palestinians. This is how radicalization happens. There is a group called FIRE, Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Here is what they have now reported. Their annual survey of college students found that in 2020, 1 in 5 students said it was ever acceptable to use violence to stop a speaker. That number has risen to 1 in 3 students. It should be 0. Instead, it has jumped 80%. Who are the most likely to support violence? Well, listen to this. Quote, those students who are the furthest to the left have been the most accepting of violence for as long as we've asked the question. That includes very liberal and democratic socialist students. And this is how people self-identify. The report goes on, quote, but a rising tide of acceptance of violence has raised all boats. Now, regardless of party or ideology, students across the board are more open to violence as a way to shut down a speaker. What was once an extreme and fringe opinion has become normalized. Instead of trying to combat this, big news organizations are making it worse. In a desperate search for clicks, listens, and views, they have been increasingly fueling hatred. They use headlines designed to radicalize people because those get more clicks. The more divisive their content, the more clicks. What can we do about this? Jimmy Kimmel can help. That's coming up. As I record this, there have been more acts of violence that might have political motivations. In New Hampshire, at a country club, someone opened fire. A man was killed. Witnesses say the shooter yelled, "Free Palestine." Authorities are currently saying he made a number of statements, and they're not sure of his motivation at this point. Meanwhile, in Sacramento, a guy opened fire on a local ABC TV station. Again, when we only have these initial reports, we don't know the motivations for sure, but there's speculation that he could have been responding to ABC suspending late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. That story has been one of the biggest for several days running. Kimmel made jokes that were, at the very least, insensitive after Charlie Kirk was killed. He actually originally put out a really great statement just expressing support from his family to the Kirk family. You don't need me to give you the recap on all this. I'm sure you've heard this. Let me get straight to what I can offer. As I record this, the word is that Kimmel will be back on the air with a show Tuesday night. If that plan goes through, he will be back on the air pretty much exactly as this episode comes out. The episodes load up overnight. So, a couple things I can tell you. First, so much of the coverage throughout all these days has been useless. Most reports have had no new information. I know how this works inside news agencies. It's always, okay, people are going to click on this topic today. Just find something to say. And then if someone has an anonymous source claiming that something might happen, and then that becomes the hook. But if you bother to read the story, you get nothing out of it. But here is the bigger problem. The media should have been using this time to point out something. Jimmy Kimmel has a huge opportunity here. He can use not just his first show back, but shows after that to help call out violence on both sides and try to calm things, even if just a little bit. The change that we need is very unlikely to come from our politics right now, but it can come from our culture. Jimmy Kimmel can do this without giving in to political pressure or giving up his core values. He can absolutely keep going after Trump and the MAGA movement for the hypocrisy he talks about, while simultaneously educating people who might not know how much violence and support for violence there is on the left. Unlike his contemporaries, he seems to have stayed away from the Israel-hating nonsense. All of the current and former Daily Show guys are doing that. Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart, John Oliver, Trevor Noah, Hasan Minhaj. Actually, the Daily Show had on Hasan Piker, of course. But Jimmy Kimmel, in general, seems to have stayed away from that. He might have the ability to recognize when the left goes wrong. I will be keeping an eye on whether Kimmel chooses to pick up this mantle. For full disclosure, I'll mention that I was cited in a report about him several years ago involving the birth of his child and a bit of kinship having nothing to do with politics. Anytime someone has an opportunity to do something good, I love to see them do it. That is the ethos behind this show. I launched it because I felt there was an opportunity to call out the media for its failures and help us all focus on facts. The good news is that I hear from more and more people inside news agencies that their bosses are getting increasingly concerned because they're starting to hear about this show from more and more people. When you share this show, when you rate and review it on the platforms, you are making a big difference. You're triggering the algorithms, you're helping other people discover it, and you're growing the community here at They Stand Corrected. As I look ahead, I am hopeful for that. As always, I want to hear what you think about all this. There are two great ways to reach me. The best is through the newsletter, and the other is through a form at my website, joshlebs.com. It's a really cool form. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.